Hello, BookTube. It's Wednesday, but I'm going to do Tag Tuesday. I was going to wait a day or two to do this, but I just realized I've been tagged by two different booktubers. First by Amy at the Dusty Bookshelf, and literally, I think probably within an hour or two last night by Steve Donoghue. It's the DNF tag. Do not finish. Sort of don't like the anagram, but that's me. So no, I thought I'd do this. The first question is, do you DNF? Now, strictly speaking, yes. If you're just talking about, do I not finish a book? But will I ever go back to see? I'm going to distinguish here because to me, DNF would be something that you start reading, you go, oh, this is really bad. I'm not going to finish it. And I'd have to say I don't really do that. I've never really done that. There are some books that I've read I didn't like. I probably should have DNF'd them, but I persisted with them. And there's a couple reasons for that. But the other thing is for not finishing a book is that I get caught up with something else, or if it's part of it's a history book, nonfiction, and I'm only reading one section of it. So I may not ever finish that book because I was only reading it for that one section, the one essay, the one chapter, two chapters, five chapters, six chapters, and the rest I wasn't really interested in at all. I get that with some histories of areas where if they come up to the present, and I'm not really interested so much in that, so I'll read to a certain point and then stop. It's not because the writing's bad, the scholarship's bad, nothing like that. It's just because I'm only interested in that certain period or that subject, and then they drift off into something else that I'm not so interested in. So I'm trying to can never get properly. There's always a glare off my glasses. But anyway, I don't think you want to look at my eyes anyway. But yeah, no, the reason why I never really have DNF'd, and under the guise of that I didn't like this book, so I'm stopping. I've never read anything so horrible that I didn't finish it, and it's partially because I know what an author goes through to write a book, and I want to give its due diligence. I want to see what they do and how they do it. And you don't get that, especially for fiction. I'm talking about fiction here. You cannot get that by reading even half the book because it's sometimes it's a long game they're playing all the way through the book. And there are recent things. Usually, ones that I don't like so much are ones that are suggested to me. Um, for some reason, I don't know. It's well, if they're suggested by sort of people that I don't know that well, and it's on a subject, I go, oh yeah, that looks interesting. And the most recent thing of that was a book that was sort of a Bram Stoker book called Shadow Play by some O'Connell. I can't remember the first name. Started out really, really, really great, and then it just went downhill. But I persevered and read it because I wanted to see what he was actually trying to do. Would he turn it around? And he didn't. But I have been surprised at times with the book that didn't start out great, and if I would have stopped at that point, I would have missed something really, really great. And then I realized, the light bulb goes off of what they were trying to do at the beginning, and you don't get that unless you have read the whole book. So people who would DNF it at that point for that reason would miss something big, a lot. They'd miss the whole idea of it. But anyway, that's my sort of idea of DNF. If you do DNF a book, does it count towards books read for the month? Now, I'm going to use DNF now interchangeably of ones that I just didn't finish for whatever reason. And no, I don't really give a count. I never really. I used to write down books that I finished, but it was only books that I finished fully. I would give a beginning date, and I've kept that over the years various times, but I don't anymore. And if I do say that I read 10 books, in a week, a month, a year. They'd be only books that I read from cover to cover. Because there's so much my reading is actually bits and pieces, essays and chapters or academic essays and things like that, or short stories out of a number of books. So it could be years before I actually finish that book in full, if I ever do, because the other chapters or short stories I might not be interested in so much, so I haven't really got around to reading them yet. It's not that I won't, but it's just it could take a long time before I do. So I would never, count it as a completed book. And the reason, fiction. There's many times that I put down a fiction book for some reason. It's like, it may have been losing my interest a little bit, and then something else sort of bright and shiny popped up, and it does get pushed in behind. There's a number of books like that I've got on the shelf that I've read halfway through, and I've loved them, but for some reason something else happened. It's either work or illness, or it was just a bad time that I started. I didn't finish it in time, and then I got too far away from it. But they will be things that I will return to, definitely. Is there a definite difference between DNF and just putting down for a bit? Yeah, that's what I'm saying. To me, there are very, very big differences there, because I have so many books on the shelf that I've read bits and pieces of, and so when I say I've read, like, say 3 books let's not count the last month or so, because that's been very poor. But I've still read. But when I do read like 3 or 4 or 5 books in a week, that's only part of my reading. A big part of it are other things that I read, and so what popular book have you DNF? Well, as I say, I really haven't. So, I'm trying to think of something. Oh, I never got to finish was Crime and Punishment, but I loved the first half of it by Dostoevsky, and there was a few things happening at the time that I never got back into it, and it just sort of got too far away from reading to continuing where I was, that I figured, okay, well, I got to start over sometime, and I will. I definitely will, because it is on the shelf, and it mocks me because I haven't finished it. What book do you wish you had DNF? Well, I suppose, in the sense of that I didn't like, I could list many things. A lot of them are sort of school books. Great Gatsby by F. Scott Fitzgerald. I remembered the name this time. Wuthering Heights. Anything most of it by the Brontes and Jane Austen. I read them. I persevered through them to try to see what I could see in them, and I did not like them. And in some ways, if I was prone to DNFing, I would have DNF'd those very, very quickly. Because what I used to do is, I suppose, like, we're getting back. When I was young, when I was in my teens and 20s, I discovered stuff on my own. I went into bookshops, and sometimes the library, but usually bookshops that had a good sort of, if for fiction-wise, classic section, either Greek and Roman or just standard literature, the canon of literature, Western literature, and I would just pick stuff up randomly off the shelf. And I'd read a few pages of it. I'd flip through, and if it was something that sounded interesting, I would read it. If it didn't sound interesting at the time, I put it back on the shelf. Now, is that DNFing? But I haven't even begun to read it, so I don't think it would be. But that's how I would. So before I went into a book, most of the time, it was because I was interested in the subject matter. Sometimes it surprised me, and I didn't really care for it so much. So that's another aspect. But because of Jane Austen and that, like, I sort of persevered, because I had a lot of people at that time when I read those were saying that they were so great, and so I thought, well, I'll see, I'll take a look, and Wuthering Heights was for class, so I had to read that. I would not have pulled it off the shelf at the time and looked at it and said, "Oh, I want to read this," I would have looked at it and put it back on the shelf, possibly for another day, and possibly I may still go back to them. That was number 6. Do you ever attempt to read? Oh, wait a minute. Oh, that was 3. What popular book had you DNF? Okay, yeah. And then what book 5 do you wish you had DNF? What book? Wait, yeah, I guess it'd be The Wuthering Heights and a lot of the school books that I was forced to read at school, which I don't know. I mean, I don't know if it's. See, this is the thing. I don't know if it's because I was. I don't think so much. It's like I should revisit these books, and the reason why I say this now is because I had to read those part of the course, and on every occasion I had bad experiences because you were not allowed to think. The teachers would not allow you to explore yourself with the book. They would say, "This is what you got to take it as, and that's it. That's it." And writers, a lot of time, aren't that hard and fast with what they meant. It's open for interpretation, and a lot of times, if you can back it up by the text, I'm happy with that. And then to me, that makes a better reader of a person rather than just reading and going, "Oh, I don't understand that. Let me read a text of what it's." Oh, okay, that's what it means. And that's how it was. It was that you were supposed to just spit out what you were told it was meant, rather than trying to figure it out yourself. And if you're having difficulty, have a little help, and then you can see, you can join the dots then, but you're joining the dots yourself, not having someone else paint the picture for you. You should always paint the picture yourself. Do you ever reattempt to read a DNF? Has this ever been successful for you? Yes. Well, let's pretend a book that I would have DNF'd if I did do that. And another was George Orwell, and I've come to this story many times, but I was forced to read 1984 and Animal Farm in school. Hated them. Totally hated it, and I hated how it was handled by the teacher and everything. So I wrote Orwell off for infinity. About 12, 13 years ago, this was while I first came to the UK. I was living in Milton Keynes. I was out of work. I was going to the library. I had a good library there, and I was burning through like all the P.G. Wodehouse and a whole bunch of other stuff that I'd sort of read or wanted to reread. And they had one of the spinner racks, and I'm looking for something else. I'm spinning it around while looking probably for more Wodehouse, but then a book falls off and falls down on my foot, literally. Little paperback. So I pick it up, I read the back, and it's about someone who's working in a bookshop. Oh, this is cool. Haven't had a bookshop myself, and worked in the book trade for like almost 20 years, off and on. So I open it up, and there's some great, and I look at it, but I for some reason just either didn't look or didn't recognize until I looked at the cover that it was George Orwell. It was, I don't like this person, put it back. And it was Keep the Apodistra Flying. I couldn't find anything else that day, so I went back to the spinner rack and took it out and thoroughly enjoyed it. And that began my journey into George Orwell. I now have the complete works, all his essays, all his letters, diaries, everything. I've got the 11 volumes of the nonfiction, but I've read all the printed books, the published books. And I reread 1984 and Animal Farm, and I can now, like what I mentioned before of how you like maybe the author is in for a longer game than just a few chapters at the beginning, and then you realize what they were doing when you finish the book. Now, I feel that way with George Orwell and 1984 and Animal Farm. I don't think they're particularly well written books at all. I think they're important books, and I can see it in his evolution of writing, of his writing career. I see it has its place. So, as I'm interested in the author itself and where he came from and where he went to for writing, what he had to say, not always agreeing with everything, but that's another matter. So I can see this fit in. So it is the long game of where it sort of fits. So I'm glad I went back to that. I'm glad I went back and reread those. So yes, that's the short answer. um, and what do you do with books you DNF? Well, as I say, I don't really DNF them in the sense of that I don't like them. I put them on the shelf if they're ones that I do like, and hopefully get back to them. And I do get back to many that I haven't finished, or I reread the sections that I did like. Do you choose more or less risky titles because of your stance on DNF? Again, like Amy, I'm not quite sure what this means. I don't really choose risky titles. I sort of go into something generally knowing what I'm getting. At least I think I do. Sometimes I'm a bit surprised, but I generally think I know what I'm getting into with these. And tag 5 booktubers. I can't think of anybody off the top of my head here. I might pop a few into the notes to do this. So so look at the notes from. Actually, no. What am I thinking of? I'll do James Hodder, David Murphy, Bill Ruttenberg at the Ruttenberg Library, and Alan. Why can't I think of your surname, Alan? Sorry. Alan Braswell. Sorry. Yeah, and as I say, James Holder, Bill Ruttenberg, and yeah. So, any of those interested, feel free to do this. And thank you, Amy, and thanks Steve for double tagging me for it for this. And so I'm glad I did this a bit sooner than later, actually. But anyway, take care, BookTube, and I'll see you next time.